My husband drained our joint savings, faked my signature on a loan, and then filed for divorce. I begged him to explain why, and he just laughed. "You were just a stand-in," he said. "My real relationship is with someone who actually matters." I went public with the truth. He fought back by telling everyone I was mentally unstable. That was 15 months ago. Now, he's spamming me with desperate messages, begging me to stop what I've set in motion. The hardest part? I loved his family. His mom was the kind of woman who'd take a dress off her own back if she thought it looked better on you. And his sister Daniela. She was my partner in crime. We used to go out, get wild, and later, as we matured, we bonded over real things. I even helped her land her first job as a personal trainer. She once told me I was her first true friend. Everyone else had cut her off. Some ugly rumor had circulated back in school. Something about her and her brother. You get the idea. I never believed it. Then came lockdown. My husband gained weight and wanted to get back in shape. I had what I thought was a kind idea, one I'll regret forever. I suggested that Daniela move in to help him stay motivated. She was 23, just out of college, still living at home, super fit, ate like a nutrition textbook. When I brought it up, my husband's eyes lit up. He called her on speaker. "Like a sleepover forever," she squealed. The next weekend, she arrived with 2 bags and a blender full of protein shakes. Typical Daniela. At first, it really was fun. Group workouts, meal prep Sundays. They bonded over routines, and I was just happy to see him focused again. He kept talking about our future, about being healthy for the kids we didn't yet have. I didn't expect what came next. Daniela had always dressed modestly, but now she was walking around in skin-tight activewear. At first, I thought it was just her getting comfortable. Then came the 6 a.m. workouts. I'd wake up alone and find them stretching together in the living room. I asked to join once. He said my energy disrupted the flow. Something started to feel off. So one day when Daniela and I were doing yoga, I asked her to show me the stretch she always did with him. We tried it, but it was awkward and distant, completely different. No eye contact, barely touching. A chill ran down my spine. I tried to push the thought away, but it got weirder. I'd come home and find her feeding him dinner, literally hand-feeding him, while they stared into each other's eyes. Their excuse? Mindful eating. One day I walked into our room and found her straddling his back on my side of the bed, doing some kind of recovery massage with essential oils. Tiny shorts, sports bra, full spa mode. That was my breaking point. I was ready to walk. Then came the moment I couldn't deny anymore. I woke up one night to strange noises in the kitchen. There they were. Daniela perched on the counter, legs wrapped around his waist, feeding him a shake while he held her by the hips. For balance. I snapped. "Daniel, what the hell are you doing? That's your sister!" He turned on me. "Oh, so now I'm not allowed to eat with my family?" The anger in his eyes was all I needed to see. That same tone I'd heard once before, when I caught an ex cheating. My stomach dropped. Those old rumors? Maybe they weren't just rumors after all. Still, I didn't blame Daniela. She was young, 23, still figuring out who she was. But my husband? 35. No excuse. I packed a bag and stayed at a nearby hotel. The next morning, I texted Daniela. Told her I wasn't angry, but we needed to talk. Alone. If she brought him, I'd call the police. She came. Alone. And the moment the door shut, she broke down crying. "I messed up everything," she said through sobs. We sat on the carpet. She looked up at me with swollen eyes. "I've been sick every morning. When I took the test, I saw 2 pink lines. I'm 3 months along." I froze. 3 months? That meant this started before she moved in. My brain couldn't keep up. She kept apologizing, gripping my hand. I gently pulled away and asked her to leave. I needed air, needed to think. Hours passed. I stared at the wall, connecting all the dots, the yoga, the food, the massages. None of it was about fitness. I grabbed my phone and texted my husband one sentence. "I want a divorce. No therapy, no talking, just done." He replied immediately, accusing me of being dramatic. I didn't answer. The next morning, I went to the bank to check our accounts. Our joint savings? Empty. $20,000 gone. He claimed it was for medical costs. The teller showed me the withdrawal slip. He'd taken everything just the day before. I felt physically sick, and I wasn't even at the end of it yet. After packing up and leaving, I drove straight to my parents' house and told them everything. My mom went pale. My dad just shook his head slowly. At first, they didn't believe me. Maybe it's just a misunderstanding, my dad said. My mom asked if I was absolutely sure about what I saw. I remembered we had home security cameras, everything backed up to the cloud. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the footage. It didn't take long to find clips that made my stomach turn. Nothing graphic, but definitely not how siblings behave. My parents watched in silence. My mom began crying. My dad's face went red with anger. "I'm going to talk to him," he said. I stopped him. No, I needed to do this my way. I went back to the hotel, still shaking. That's when the notifications started rolling in. Mutual friends were messaging me. Daniela had posted online claiming I was jealous of how close she and her brother were. She said I was making things up because I couldn't handle my husband having a female friend, never mind that the friend was his sister. People started commenting. Some were defending her, saying I'd always been possessive. Daniel jumped in, saying he was concerned about my mental health and thinking of getting me professional help. He posted old photos of us with captions like, "I just hope she finds peace soon." It was twisted. I got texts from people asking if I was okay. A few friends offered support, but others, their messages felt distant, cautious, like they weren't sure who to believe. I needed to grab some clothes and documents, so I went back to our house, only to find the locks had been changed. I called a locksmith, showed him my ID, and got inside. What I found made my blood run cold. Mail piled up on the table, hidden bills, bank notices, and divorce papers. Dated 2 months ago, Daniel had already filed, claiming I had been unfaithful. He'd even included fake texts and emails as evidence. I snapped photos of everything, grabbed what I could, and headed for the door when Daniela pulled up. She walked toward me, tears in her eyes. "We need to talk about the baby," she said quietly. I told her to stay back. She broke down crying, said she never meant for any of this to happen. I didn't respond. I got in the car and drove off. That night, I called Michelle, a lawyer friend. She picked up on the third ring, voice groggy with sleep, until she heard the panic in mine. She told me to start documenting everything, immediately. She referred me to a divorce attorney named Christopher, someone who specialized in messy, high-conflict cases. I booked an appointment for the next morning. I could barely hold the pen steady as I wrote down the address. That night, I didn't sleep. I just sat there, thinking back over the last 3 months. Every interaction, every moment that hadn't made sense. How many lies had I accepted as normal? I opened my phone and looked at old photos, trying to see what I'd missed. And there it was, the way they sat too close at dinner, hands brushing under the table, glances that lingered too long. It was all there. I just refused to see it. At my meeting with Christopher, his expression grew darker with every screenshot, every document. "This was premeditated," he said. "He's been planning this for months, probably before she ever moved in." The fake divorce filing, the emptied accounts, it was all methodical, calculated. We filed an emergency motion to freeze anything he hadn't already taken. Christopher told me to check for any unusual financial activity. With trembling hands, I opened our accounts. That's when I saw it. Daniel had taken out a second mortgage on our house. Forged paperwork, my name included. $40,000, gone. Taken out just weeks ago, right around the time he'd suddenly started acting affectionate again. Christopher called it what it was, fraud. We could fight it, but it would be long and expensive. And right now, I didn't even have a safe place to stay. My parents' house was too obvious. First place Daniel would look. Michelle offered me her spare room. No hesitation. I packed what little I had and moved in. Then came the call from my boss, Richard. His voice was tight, uneasy. Daniela had shown up at my office. Said it was about family matters. When security wouldn't let her up, she caused a scene, crying, saying she needed her sister-in-law, making sure everyone in the building heard. Richard was kind. He said he'd make sure she wasn't allowed in again. He told me to take time off. But the damage was done. At work, I could feel the whispers. Conversation stopped when I walked by. Some coworkers looked at me with sympathy, others with judgment, like I should have seen this coming. That evening, my phone lit up again. Daniel's mom. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to. Her voice was soft, distant. "I need to see you," she said. "Please." I agreed, but only in public. We met at a coffee shop downtown. I chose a table near the window so I could see her coming. When she walked in, she looked older than I remembered. Tired. She sat down slowly, folded her hands in her lap, and just stared at them. She looked like someone carrying a secret, and I had a feeling I already knew what it was. She was still wearing her wedding ring, said she'd been cleaning out the garage when she came across a few dusty boxes from the kids' teenage years. Inside one was Daniela's old high school diary, decorated with faded stickers and hearts drawn in glitter gel pen. Thinking it'd be full of silly crushes and school drama, she opened it up. What she found made her go cold. The entries weren't sweet, they were cryptic and deeply unsettling. Page after page filled with vague language about a secret bond, how no one could understand their connection, how they had to sneak around at night. Daniela had written about late-night visits to Daniel's room, about how he was the only one who truly saw her, truly understood her. The way she wrote about him, it wasn't how someone writes about a sibling. Daniel's mother handed me the diary with trembling hands. I flipped through it slowly, every sentence turning my stomach more than the last. My mind raced, adding up the pieces I'd been too afraid to connect. She started crying, quietly, but uncontrollably. Said she'd confronted them separately the day before. Daniela had deflected, acted confused and hurt like she always did, twisting herself into the role of the victim. But Daniel didn't hide. His mask slipped. She said he got defensive, angry, started yelling about how she never really understood him, how she always treated his younger brother better. Then came the real admission. He shouted that Daniela was the only one who had ever stood by him, that she truly loved him, that no one else ever would. That's when she hit record. She'd hidden her phone under the table, her hands shaking, but managed to capture it all. She played me the audio right there at the cafe. Daniel's voice was sharp, full of emotion, saying their relationship was different, that no one else could understand it. He talked about how I was just filling space, how the baby would finally make them a real family, the kind of life he always wanted. My skin crawled. I thanked her for telling me the truth, for having the courage to face what no mother wants to admit. She grabbed my hand, told me she was sorry, not just for what happened, but for raising a son capable of it. I told her she couldn't blame herself. People like Daniel are experts at hiding who they are. The next morning, I gave the audio to Christopher. When he finished listening, he looked up slowly and said, "This changes everything." With the diary, the surveillance footage, and now Daniel's own voice confirming what had happened, our case had real weight. Christopher filed new motions immediately and warned me. The fight was far from over, and it might get worse before it got better. And he was right. Daniel doubled down on his online smear campaign. He posted more twisted stories about my mental decline, about how I was hallucinating and couldn't tell reality from fiction. Old photos of us appeared with captions like, "Still hoping for her healing." The manipulation was unbearable. Friends started reaching out again, confused, unsure what to believe. Some offered their support. Others seemed to keep their distance, unsure whose version was true. I wanted to respond, wanted to shout the truth from the rooftops, but Christopher said no. That silence was power, that Daniel would unravel himself. And then it got frightening. I started getting texts from strange numbers, late at night, early in the morning, all telling me to drop the divorce, that I was ruining a good man's life, that I'd regret tearing apart a happy family. The messages got darker, threatening. Then one night, I came home from work and found all 4 tires on my car slashed, deep cuts like someone had used a blade. The security camera in the garage? Broken. Footage? Corrupted. That night, fear turned to fury. With Michelle's blessing, I installed my own cameras. Around the apartment, on the hallway, even the garage. I changed up my routine, never left at the same time twice. I kept pepper spray in my bag and my car keys between my fingers. Michelle's boyfriend, a quiet but watchful former Marine named Jordan, started escorting me to and from my car without me even having to ask. 1 week later, the cameras caught everything. It was Daniela. She'd come back. Hood up! But her face was clear when she looked straight at the lens to check for witnesses. The footage showed her slashing the tires again. 2:47 a.m., rage all over her face. I called the police and filed a report immediately. Christopher moved fast. He filed for a restraining order the next morning. The judge reviewed the footage and granted it the same day. Daniela was legally barred from coming anywhere near me, my apartment, my workplace, even my mailbox. Daniel didn't take it well. He started calling from unknown numbers, leaving rambling voicemails, saying I was destroying his sister's life, that the stress was putting the baby at risk, that I'd grow old and bitter and regret everything. Then came mediation day. It was a Thursday, gray and cold. I wore a sharp charcoal suit, the one that made me feel like I could survive anything. I didn't feel brave, but I looked it. Daniel showed up with Daniela. Even though she had a restraining order, their lawyer argued that since she was pregnant, she had a right to hear how the outcome might affect her child. The mediator allowed it but made her sit in a separate room. She could listen but not speak. Daniel started with his performance. Calm voice, wet eyes, painting me as paranoid, possessive, unstable. He said I was just jealous, that I'd always had a problem with how close he was to his family, that I couldn't handle a strong sibling bond. Then his lawyer pulled out the fake evidence, badly altered screenshots, edited texts, photos made to look like I'd been unfaithful, a total fabrication. But then it was our turn. Christopher laid everything out, one by one, the security clips, the diary, the audio confession from Daniel's own mother. Daniel's lawyer objected again and again, but the mediator wanted the full story. And as each piece of evidence landed, one after another, Daniel's carefully constructed lie began to collapse like soggy cardboard. Daniel started unraveling right in front of us. His cool facade cracked. He began contradicting himself, mixing up dates, stumbling over his own lies. When Christopher pressed him, he got visibly agitated. His lawyer tried to redirect, but the damage was already done. Then came the knockout punch. Christopher presented the forged mortgage documents. My signature obviously faked. He showed evidence of money transfers stretching back months. Secret accounts opened under Daniel's name. Withdrawals in the middle of the night while I lay sleeping next to him. He had been planning his escape with Daniela long before I ever suspected a thing. The mediator's expression shifted, from neutral to stern, as she examined each page of financial evidence. During a short break, I overheard Daniel whisper shouting at his lawyer. The man looked drained, trying to calm him down. Daniel still believed he could talk his way out of everything, still clung to the illusion that his version of reality could override the facts. But when the session resumed, his lawyer spoke with a heavy voice. They were ready to negotiate. The back and forth dragged for hours. Daniel tried to argue that he should keep the house for the baby, tried to present himself as a doting father. Christopher immediately shut it down, reminding the mediator of the fraud, the betrayal, the danger. We demanded the house, repayment of stolen funds, and damages for the emotional toll. That's when my coworker Stephen arrived. Christopher had asked him to appear as a witness. Stephen calmly described how Daniela showed up at our office, shouting about loyalty, crying dramatically, trying to force her way past security. He recalled her yelling threats while being escorted out. His testimony painted a vivid picture of workplace harassment, intimidation, and instability. The mediator looked done. She turned to Daniel's lawyer and said firmly, "Settle now or we go to court where things would only get worse." Daniel lost it, completely. He stood up shouting that I was trying to destroy his life, that I was taking everything out of spite. He ranted about Daniela needing him, how their child deserved a whole family. The mediator warned him to sit down or the session would be terminated. His lawyer put a firm hand on his shoulder, whispering something sharp. After a long pause, Daniel sat. Through clenched teeth, they agreed to our terms. I would keep the house. Daniel would be responsible for paying back the fraudulent loan. He'd return what he stole, even if it meant garnishing his wages. The divorce would be finalized without appeal. But one condition made my skin crawl. Daniela had to give a sworn statement. They brought her in quietly. She looked pale, fragile, her pregnancy just starting to show. She didn't make eye contact, just sat, hands over her stomach, and started speaking. Her voice was flat, mechanical, like she wasn't really there. She confirmed everything. That the relationship had started in high school, that they'd planned my removal together, that they wanted to raise their child as a family once I was gone. Her words were cold, without emotion, like she was reading from a page, not describing real life. When she finished, Daniel reached for her. Security stepped in instantly, holding him back. He yelled about love, about destiny, about no one understanding what they had. Daniela didn't even flinch, just stared straight ahead, like the room was empty. She was quietly led out by her attorney. The mediator scheduled our final court hearing for 2 weeks later. I thought it was over. But that night, Daniel showed up at Michelle's apartment, drunk. He pounded on the door, yelling my name, demanding I hear him out. That 5 minutes would change everything. The walls shook from the force of his fists. Michelle called the police while I hid in the closet, shaking. They arrested him for violating the restraining order and public intoxication, and that's when the final thread snapped. During booking, police searched his car. Inside, they found files, financial records, false invoices, rerouted payments. He'd been embezzling from his employer, creating fake clients, redirecting funds. It was a full-blown scheme. His company filed charges the same day. Christopher told me this new evidence only made our case stronger. It proved Daniel's pattern of deception went far beyond our marriage. 2 weeks later, I stood in court on a sunny morning that felt painfully ironic. Daniel entered the courtroom in an orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed, out on bail, awaiting trial for fraud and embezzlement. His lawyer presented the settlement. The judge reviewed it carefully, asking direct, pointed questions. When she asked if I accepted the terms, I stood tall and said yes. With one sharp strike of the gavel, it was done. The marriage was dissolved. The house was mine. The stolen money would be repaid, even if it took years. Daniel was ordered to cover restitution, and if he missed a single payment, it would come directly from his wages. His parental rights would be addressed separately in family court, but as of that day, I was legally free. Outside the courthouse, Daniel's mother found me. She didn't say anything at first, just walked up and pulled me into a tight hug. No excuses, no justification. Just a quiet apology in the way her arms held on. And that's when I realized I didn't just survive this. I won. She told me I'd always be family to her, the daughter she wished she'd had. Her voice trembled, but her resolve was clear. She was in therapy now, working through the shock of who her children had become. And until both of them sought real psychological help, she had cut off all financial support. Daniela had moved back into her parents' house. Her lease was gone. Her independence shattered. Without Daniel around to manipulate her, it seemed like something inside her had finally cracked open. Friends said she'd gone quiet. No more social media, no public posts, no drama. Just therapy, twice a week. The pregnancy was progressing normally, but she still hadn't decided what to do. She was considering adoption. 6 months later, Daniel went to trial for embezzlement. His lawyer struck a plea deal to avoid a longer sentence. 2 years in minimum security and full restitution. But his career? Completely gone. The tech world isn't big when it comes to scandals, and once word spread, he couldn't get so much as a support desk job. His name was radioactive. I started rebuilding, slowly. The house felt heavy at first. Echoes in the corners, shadows of everything that had happened. But I made it mine. Painted the walls in warm yellows and soft blues, colors Daniel had always hated. I adopted a German Shepherd mix named Reese from the shelter. She barked at every stranger and curled up at the foot of my bed like a little soldier. I added cameras, upgraded the locks. I created safety where there had been none. Real friends stood by me. Many confessed they had always felt something was off. The way Daniel and Daniela stood too close, touched too much, spoke in whispers that lingered too long. They hadn't wanted to believe their instincts, but now they knew. That honesty brought us closer. Their support kept me steady. Work got better too. Once the gossip died down, my boss, Richard, made sure I had space when I needed it. HR stepped in and made it clear the whispers weren't welcome. Even Steven, the coworker who testified, became a real friend. He'd check in, bring me coffee on bad days, and never asked for anything in return. I poured myself into my work. Got a promotion 6 months later. The raise helped. I could cover the mortgage comfortably, without help from anyone. No shared accounts, no hidden debt, just mine. I also started therapy. I had to face what I'd lived through. The betrayal, the manipulation, the way fear had crept into every corner of my life. My therapist helped me see the signs I'd missed, the control I'd mistaken for love. It wasn't my fault, but I could learn, grow, and heal. About half a year after the divorce, I heard Daniela had given birth to a baby girl. She named her Sarah. Daniel's parents were the ones mostly caring for her. Daniela was battling postpartum depression and trying to finish her online certification and personal training. One day I received a letter from her, pages of handwritten apologies filled with regret. I didn't answer, but I didn't throw it away either. I kept it in a box with court documents, letters from lawyers, copies of the forged papers, a quiet record of everything I survived. Daniel served his time quietly. His mother told me he stopped getting visits after the first month. Even Daniela never went back. His parents visited monthly. Obligation, not affection. Bringing small items and updates on the baby he'd never know. He sent me letters too. I returned them unopened. Christopher told me Daniel would have to register as a financial fraud offender upon release, severely limiting his ability to ever work in finance or tech again. The life he had built was gone, and it wasn't coming back. 8 months after the divorce, I met someone. Nancy. It was at a friend's birthday party. Loud music, too many candles, and something about her just made me feel calm. She had a gentle voice and a kind laugh. She didn't push, didn't pry. She understood my need for space without me having to explain. We took it slow. Long walks with Reese, lazy weekends cooking, talking for hours over coffee that went cold. For the first time in years, I wasn't on edge. It was real, honest, quiet, safe. As Daniel's prison wages trickled in, I paid off the fraudulent loan. The money came slowly, but it came. I opened my own savings account. No one else's name on it, no one else calling the shots. And for the first time in a long time, I felt secure. Daniel's mom and I still had lunch sometimes, at the same little cafe where she'd handed me the diary. She kept me updated, with eyes that held both pride and pain. Daniela was trying to be a good mom. She was struggling, but trying. The baby was healthy, beautiful, innocent in all of this. Daniel would be out soon, but had nowhere to go. His parents had drawn a hard line. No more. Daniela wanted nothing to do with him. The illusion was shattered. In the end, I won. But it didn't feel like winning. It felt like surviving. I'd kept my name, my house, and my dignity. But it had cost me trust, peace, and a piece of myself I might never get back. I'd slept beside someone capable of destroying me, and I didn't see it coming. And yet, here I am. Still standing, still building, still healing. And I'm not done yet. In the end, what proved I wasn't crazy wasn't just the evidence. It was the people who stood beside me. Daniel's mom had the courage to face the truth about her children, no matter how painful. And others, friends, co-workers, strangers who became my lifelines, helped me when I didn't know how to help myself. They reminded me that not everyone lies, not everyone manipulates. Some people just show up, with kindness and without conditions. Over time, the house stopped feeling haunted. Each mortgage payment became a step forward, not away from the past, but towards something I could finally call my own. I painted the walls with colors Daniel would have hated. Soft blues, warm yellows, shades of freedom. I turned the garage, once his gym, into my art studio. I learned to paint. The guest room where Daniela had once stayed became my home office. I launched a small consulting business from that very room. Every corner of the house became mine again, reclaimed with purpose. In therapy, I learned to trust myself. Those uncomfortable gut feelings I'd once brushed off, they had been warnings. My body had known long before my mind was willing to listen. Now I didn't ignore those instincts. I honored them. They had saved me once. They would again, if needed. Nancy and I grew closer over months of slow, intentional connection. She met my parents, and they adored her. The steadiness in her voice, the way she never asked for more than I could give. When I was ready, a year later, we made it official. Nothing flashy, just two people who respected each other and chose honesty. Every day. When Daniel was released from prison, I was nervous, even with the restraining order. But he never reached out. His mom said he'd moved to another state, working warehouse shifts for minimum wage, living in a studio apartment in a rough neighborhood. Daniela stayed behind with the baby, living with her parents. The fantasy had shattered. Reality had left them no place to hide. Sometimes I found myself wondering, in quiet moments, what would have happened if I hadn't invited Daniela to move in? Would they have found another way? Was it always going to unfold this way? But that kind of thinking leads nowhere. I made the best decision I could with the information I had. They made the choices that broke everything. That's on them. My life settled into a calm rhythm. Work, therapy, painting, dog walks, dinners with Nancy. The chaos slowly faded into memory. People stopped whispering. I became just another woman rebuilding after divorce, starting over in her 30s. And that's exactly what I wanted. Not to be pitied, not to be a cautionary tale, just to live. Free. The last time I saw Daniela was unplanned. A random Tuesday afternoon at the grocery store. She was pushing a stroller. A toddler, Sarah, looked up at me with big, curious eyes. Daniela looked older, tired, worn. We locked eyes for one heavy second. She took a step toward me, but I shook my head. She understood. She turned around and walked away. Some bridges can't be rebuilt. Some betrayals stay broken. Still, I survived. All of it. The lies that burrowed deep. The manipulation that wore a smile. The fear that kept me awake at night. The legal battles that drained my strength. And I came out the other side stronger, wiser, not bitter, just more careful. My life became simpler, but fuller. Filled with people who showed love through consistency, not control. Through honesty, not hidden agendas. I was finally myself. And that was everything. Months passed. The quiet started to feel normal. Peaceful. I stopped jumping at shadows. Stopped expecting Daniela or Daniel to reappear. It felt like healing. Until one morning the phone rang. It was Daniel's mom. Her voice was shaking. She told me Daniela had disappeared 3 days earlier, packed up her car, emptied her savings, and left nothing but a note. She said she needed a fresh start, somewhere no one knew who she was. The police said they couldn't do anything. She hadn't committed a crime. She still had custody. Daniel's parents were heartbroken, especially his mom, who had basically been raising Sarah. I told her I hadn't heard anything. She cried quietly. Then she hung up. That was the last time I ever heard from her. Life went on. My promotion came through with a better title and bigger paycheck. I was leading a team now, something I'd always wanted. Stephen and I became close friends, grabbing lunch together and complaining about work. He never brought up the past unless I did first. I respected him deeply for that. Nancy moved in 6 months later. We painted the master bedroom together, got more paint on ourselves than the walls. Reese loved having another person around to sneak him treats and rub his belly. It felt right, like the house had finally caught up with my heart. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that was enough. Eventually, the house became more than just a place I slept. It became home again. One afternoon, while scrolling through social media, I saw a headline that made me freeze. Daniel had been arrested again, not for anything related to me, thankfully, but for stealing from his new job at a construction company. I guess prison hadn't taught him anything, or maybe deception was just who he was. I blocked his profile. I didn't need updates on his downward spiral. That chapter was closed. A few days later, Christopher, my lawyer, called with unexpected news. A lawyer in Oregon representing Daniela had reached out. She wanted to formally relinquish any claim to Daniel's money, property, or assets. In exchange, she asked me not to pursue a civil suit against her for harassment or emotional harm. Truthfully, I hadn't even thought about suing her. But Christopher said to take the deal, get it in writing, seal the door, and walk away for good. A month later, the papers arrived. Daniela had signed it all away. Any link to Daniel, their past, their story. It felt like the final piece clicking into place. Legal closure to match the emotional one I'd been building through therapy. My therapist told me I was doing well. The nightmares had mostly stopped. I could talk about it without feeling like my chest was in a vice. I even started cracking jokes. Dark, dry humor that made Nancy roll her eyes and laugh. Sometimes I'd joke about my sweet home Alabama era. It felt good to laugh about something that once shattered me. I bumped into one of Daniel and Daniela's cousins at a coffee shop. She looked uncomfortable, but I waved her over. We chatted. She told me the family was a mess. No one mentioned Daniel or Daniela anymore. They were ghosts in their own bloodline. Their parents had moved into a smaller house. Downsized. Moved on. We wished each other well. Then we walked away, like strangers with history. Nancy and I got engaged on a random Thursday morning over breakfast. No big gesture. Just her asking, mid-scrambled eggs, "Want to make it official?" I said yes with a mouth full of toast. We both laughed. There was no need for a huge wedding. We wanted something small, something real. Just our people, the ones who showed up when life got hard. We booked a little lakefront venue, 30 guests tops, no plus ones we barely knew. No polite invites to people who had failed us. Michelle was my maid of honor, obviously. She'd earned that spot long before there were dresses or vows. A few weeks before the wedding, I got an email from an unfamiliar address. Subject line, "Please read." It was Daniela. She said she was living in Maine now, working at a daycare. She'd met someone who didn't know her past and was trying to be a good mom to Sarah. She apologized again and said she hoped I was happy. I deleted it without replying. Some doors stay shut for a reason. Our wedding day was perfect. Nancy looked beautiful in her simple white dress. I wore a suit that finally felt like me. Reese was our ring bearer and tried to eat the pillow halfway down the aisle. Everyone laughed. It was imperfect. And perfect. My dad walked me down the aisle, eyes misty, whispered how proud he was of who I'd become. I'll never forget that. We wrote our own vows, honest, simple, real. Promises to communicate, to stay kind, to build something with intention. When we kissed, the cheers were so loud a flock of birds took off from the trees behind us. The reception was just a lakeside barbecue. Good food, better people, laughter that echoed off the water. Stephen gave a speech about how he watched me rebuild from the ground up. Michelle told embarrassing college stories. Nancy's sister toasted our future with words that made everyone tear up. 2 weeks in Costa Rica for our honeymoon. No phones, no news, no ghosts from the past. Just beaches, monkeys, rainforests, and freedom. I didn't think about Daniel or Daniela once. They weren't the headline anymore. They were footnotes. When we returned, there was a letter waiting in our mailbox. From Daniel's mom. She hadn't been invited, but had sent a wedding gift anyway. A crystal vase, and a note that said she was happy I'd found peace. She included a photo of Sarah. The little girl looked exactly like Daniela had at that age. I kept the vase. I tossed the photo. Some ties don't need to be honored. Life moved forward. It was quieter now. Work, dinner, walks with Reese, weekend trips to farmers markets. That ordinary rhythm felt like luxury. We started talking about kids, maybe fostering, maybe adoption, maybe both. We'd build a family, not out of desperation or illusion, but out of love and choice and stability. Reese would be a great big brother. I heard Daniel got out of jail again. He left the state immediately. His parole officer said he had no place to stay. No job prospects, no future here. And for the first time since this entire thing began, I didn't feel fear. I just felt nothing at all. Christopher called one afternoon. Said Daniel had moved to Florida. Some under-the-table construction gig. As long as he stayed away from me, I didn't care where he went. The restraining order was permanent, nationwide. One wrong step, and he'd be back in prison. My business kept growing. I eventually hired an assistant, a young woman named Kayla, who reminded me of myself in my early 20s. Smart, driven, and still figuring out her place in the world. I found myself mentoring her, not just about spreadsheets or contracts, but about listening to her instincts, setting boundaries, and knowing her worth. Nancy and I bought a new house in a better neighborhood. The old one sold fast to a young couple just starting out. I hoped they'd make happier memories there than I had. We moved on a Saturday with friends helping and Reese supervising from his dog bed. The new house had space, a big backyard, and an extra bedroom for future foster placements. It finally felt like we were building something real. One day at the grocery store, I ran into someone who used to know Daniel. She said he'd gone to rehab. Drinking problem. And Daniela? She'd married a man she met online and moved to Montana. Something about a ranch and wide open spaces. I just nodded. I didn't need details. Their lives weren't mine anymore. It took months, but Nancy and I were finally approved as foster parents. Our first placement was a teenage boy named Jordan. He'd bounced between homes and didn't trust anyone. He was angry, closed off, and familiar. I remembered that feeling. So we gave him space, showed up consistently, and eventually, he softened. The first time he called me Mom, I cried in the bathroom for 10 minutes. Work kept climbing too. I got promoted again, now managing an entire department. Stephen had changed companies, but we still had lunch once a month. He was engaged to a sweet guy named Ronald, and he glowed every time he talked about him. Watching love work out for other people felt good. Daniel's father passed away suddenly. Heart attack. His mother called me, not to invite me to the funeral, just to let me know. I sent flowers. Didn't attend. She told me Daniel showed up drunk and had to be escorted out. Daniela didn't come at all. Whatever they had, that twisted version of family, it was gone, broken beyond repair. A year after Jordan moved in, we adopted him officially. The ceremony was small but powerful. He'd changed so much. Thoughtful, kind. He was applying to colleges, planning to study social work. Said he wanted to help other kids like him. Nancy and I were so proud we could barely speak. Then, on what would have been my wedding anniversary with Daniel, I got one final email from Daniela. She was getting divorced. Her husband had learned about her past. She wanted to know if I'd consider forgiving her. Maybe even being friends again. I stared at the email for a long time. Then I deleted it. Some people you forgive from a distance. Not for them, but for you. So it doesn't rot inside you. But forgiveness doesn't mean rebuilding what was destroyed. It means letting go and walking away for good. Daniela was a stranger to me now, a shadow from a life that didn't exist anymore. Nancy and I celebrated our 5th anniversary in Italy. Pasta, tiny cafes, walks through ancient cobbled streets. It was the first marriage I'd been in that felt like partnership, built on truth, on respect, on showing up every day with love and honesty. Jordan graduated high school with honors. We threw him a big party in the backyard. Friends, family, laughter. He gave a short speech, thanking us for showing him what a real home felt like. Nancy and I held hands under the table, eyes shining. I never heard from Daniel again, not after his dad's funeral. Sometimes I wondered if he was still alive, but I never Googled him. That chapter had closed, the book sealed. I had everything I needed: a steady, loving wife, a son who made us proud every day, a career I'd built from scratch, friends who'd stood beside me through the worst, and a calm mind that finally felt like my own. The life I rebuilt, from ash and glass and silence, was fuller than the one I'd lost. Now, we're just a regular family in a quiet neighborhood. Jordan's off at college. Nancy and I are planning our next foster placement. Reese is getting a little gray around the muzzle, but he still sprints to the door every time we grab his leash. And I wake up most mornings thinking the same thing. This boring, beautiful, steady life, this is the win.